On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 278. The summit negotiation meeting between the heads of intelligence agencies began in Qatar on Wednesday. Reports are that it will take weeks to possibly reach a deal. Substantial escalations in the fighting in northern Gaza. The IDF expands its evacuation orders to the entire region of Gaza City after completing a 2-week operation in Sajaiya. Major bombing in Han Yunis, reportedly killing close to 30 Palestinians in a school shelter. The IDF confirms an airstrike in the area targeting a Hamas operative. After many technical failures, the floating pier in Gaza, meant to facilitate the entrance of humanitarian aid, is going to be connected one final time before being dismantled and abandoned. Major escalations between Israel and Hezbollah. The IDF assassinates prominent Hezbollah figures and carries out attacks deep in Baalbek. Hezbollah missile barrages kill 2 Israeli civilians and injure others. The United States is due to follow through on a shipment of 1,700 500-pound bombs to Israel after separating them from the 1-ton bombs that are still being held back. Hello everyone, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here to bring you the latest highlights from the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of July 10th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of July 11th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, despite several days of increased pessimism, the new round of negotiations did commence on July 9th and swung into higher gear on July 10th. On July 9th, meetings were held in Egypt between the CIA Director William Barnes, the head of the Israeli Shabak Ronen Bar, alongside Egyptian officials, reportedly discussing an IDF withdrawal and redeployment around the Rafah crossing and the Philadelphia line. So again, the Philadelphia line is the border between Gaza and Egypt. While several news sources reported important advances that were made in these talks, later reports added that these were only preliminary talks and did not discuss the actual mechanisms of operating the Rafah crossing. And furthermore, Hamas also issued statements later that day in which the group added that Israel is conditioning its withdrawal from the Philadelphia line on mechanisms that will be put into place, all of which are going to be rejected by Hamas. Despite this, on July 10th in Qatar, the summit meeting between the CIA Director William Barnes, the head of the Egyptian intelligence Abbas Kamel, Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Athani, and the top Israeli team, the head of the Mossad Dedi Barnea, the head of the Shabak Ronen Bar, and the IDF General Nitzan Alon, who is in charge of the hostage file for the IDF, took place. Reports are that the negotiations opened in a positive spirit. However, the complexity of the negotiations is due to take several weeks to possibly resolve. Despite that, the mere convening of this meeting is into itself quite important. The heads of these different agencies only come together when the negotiating teams feel that there is the possibility of a breakthrough, there's something to negotiate. So despite all the denials of both sides that there is actually the red lines will not be met by the other side, it does appear that the negotiating teams feel there is what to work with. We will find out more about that, obviously, in the coming days. Relating to the hostage deal, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant spoke at an event on July 10th, stating that the current situation is a unique window of opportunity to bring the hostages back, and that the deal will advance Israel's national and security interests, while the IDF will be able to overcome any risks that the deal entails. So we'll find out more in the coming days how these negotiations are going and whether the heads of the different intelligence agencies feel that there's what to work with. They're then going to take this back to their respective leaderships. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there was a barrage of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip in the last several days, targeting the areas of Eshkol. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, there have been a consistent increase in the intensity of fighting and IDF activity, with some sources suggesting that the IDF is attempting to increase its pressure on Hamas in order to secure flexibility in the hostage negotiations. This has been echoed with some reports in AP on July 8th as well. Some sources were quoted as stating that the external leadership of Hamas came under pressure from elements within Gaza to agree to flexibility in the negotiations due to the devastation and the increased fighting in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. As part of this, on July 8th, the IDF issued new evacuation orders to Palestinians in the more western parts of Gaza City. Civilians in the neighborhood of Savara, Rimal, Tel al-Halwa, and Darj Tufah were all ordered to evacuate to shelters in Dir el-Balach, this is further south in central Gaza. The Ministry of Communications in the Gaza Strip, which I will add is known to be far less reliable than the Health Ministry, also reported that the IDF issued evacuation orders to the El Mamdani and El Ahli hospitals in Gaza City. However, I will say again, while the Ministry of Communications in Gaza did state that this was unconfirmed by the Ministry of Health in Gaza and was also not confirmed by the IDF. By July 10th, there were already reports of intensive fighting that was occurring in the Savara area, and on that day, the IDF expanded the evacuation orders, publishing instructions to civilians throughout the entire area of Gaza City to evacuate down south. This is the most extensive evacuation order that the IDF has issued in northern Gaza since the war began, or since the major invasion began back in October. The maps that were published showed the specific corridors that were designated for evacuation, calling upon civilians to evacuate to Deir el-Balach and to El Zawaida regions. Local Palestinians on the ground were quoted in several different news sites stating that there has been a substantial increase and intensifying of IDF activity and bombings in the northern parts of Gaza, reminiscent of the beginning of the war. Regarding some of the noteworthy fighting incidents that occurred in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip in the last several days, on July 8th, the Al-Qassam brigades reported several operations targeting IDF troops in the Tel al-Halwa region, including firing Yassin 105 missiles at jeeps and tanks and detonating rigged explosives. The Al-Quds brigades, that is the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, also reported intensive fighting in the areas of Tel al-Halwa. On July 10th, the IDF reported completing its 2-week operation in Sajaiya, this is in the eastern parts of Gaza City, after very intensive battles were reported in the last several days. The IDF reported that throughout its operation it had located and destroyed at least 8 attack tunnels that spanned across over 6 kilometers in Sajaiya, and that at least 150 Hamas operatives had been killed in different gun battles throughout these 2 weeks. Some of the tunnels included communications arrays and infrastructure for extended stays, and according to the IDF, these included electrical grids and cooking equipment. As part of the operation, the IDF also published images of a medical facility that Hamas had taken over and had converted into an operational headquarters, in which the IDF also located substantial amounts of weaponry as well as intelligence information. So again, all that is happening in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, on July 8th, the IDF carried out an airstrike against a school in the Al-Nuseirat refugee camp, stating that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad had taken up positions within that school. I will say that this appears to be an increasing pattern of the IDF. Different schools in the Gaza Strip are designated to be used as shelters. However, the IDF has increasingly been stating that Hamas has taken them over and using them as headquarters. There have been reports of the IDF carrying out airstrikes against different schools throughout the southern parts of the Gaza Strip and the central parts of the Gaza Strip at an increasing rate in the last several days. In addition, on July 10th, Palestinian sources reported a major IDF bombing that occurred in a market in a Nuseirat refugee camp. The IDF, however, did not make any comment about that attack. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, in addition to the ongoing fighting in Rafah, there was one noteworthy incident that occurred on July 9th. Reports emerged in Gaza about an airstrike against a school that occurred in the Abbasan region. This is the eastern parts of Han Yunis. According to reports, at least 29 people were killed in that attack. Several hours later, the IDF put out a statement confirming that it did carry out an airstrike very nearby, targeting a Hamas operative who participated in the October 7th attack. However, the IDF stated that it used precise weaponry and that it is looking into those reports about the school being hit and those Palestinians that were killed. Right now, the IDF has not published any findings of its report. And a day later, both France and the UK issued condemnations of that attack. In other news related to the Gaza Strip, speaking in the Israeli Knesset on July 10th, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant related to the amount of Hamas operatives that he would estimate to have been killed or injured in the war. He stated that he would estimate that 60% of Hamas's fighting forces have been killed or injured thus far. I will say, however, that it is noteworthy that already in January, Gallant stated that roughly half of Hamas's forces had already been killed or injured. He said then that a quarter of the forces have been killed and a quarter have been injured, so stating that it is now 60% either means that there's been a substantial decrease in the pace that the IDF has managed to either kill or injure Hamas fighters, or that these numbers are not that accurate. In the past several days, however, both Gallant and different security officials have began stating that some 14,000 Hamas operatives have been killed thus far in the war. This ups the number from the most recent publication that the IDF had put out several months ago, stating that 13,000 Hamas operatives had been killed. Regarding casualties, one IDF soldier was reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 3 days since my last report, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 325. 31 IDF soldiers reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 3 days, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip to 2,115. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 142 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 3 days, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 38,295. 88,241 Palestinians reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Again, I remind everyone that the figures that Israel has recently begun stating says that some 14,000 of those killed are Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other fighting operatives. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, on July 9th, the Palestinian Red Crescent reported that all of its clinics and medical facilities in northern Gaza have been forced to shut down due to IDF activity. So this comes alongside that report from the Palestinian Ministry of Communications that the different hospitals have been ordered to evacuate. The Palestinian Red Crescent is also reporting that its medical facilities in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip are effectively shutting down. With regards to the entrance of aid trucks, a report was issued on July 8th indicating that there are hundreds of aid trucks that are stuck along the Egyptian border, with crews waiting in the area for weeks on end. According to some of the reports, some of the cargo has been waiting in the hot desert sun for over 50 days, and as a result, some of it has ended up being returned and destroyed due to expiration dates passing. Alongside the closure of the Rafah crossing, which led to severe decreases in the entrance of aid trucks throughout May and June, the entrance of aid trucks through the different crossings into the Gaza Strip has been relatively steady in the last several weeks. This again is according to that report. Aid trucks have been entering through the Kerem Shalom crossing and through several different crossings in northern parts of the Gaza Strip, averaging between 200 and 250 trucks entering on most days. The IDF has also repeatedly been emphasizing that the UN agencies are not distributing aid fast enough in the Gaza Strip. On July 9th, the IDF Unit for Coordinating Operations in the Palestinian Territories issued a statement and pictures saying that over 1,150 cargo aid containers are awaiting pickup on the Gazan side of the Kerem Shalom crossing, and 50 such containers are awaiting on the Erez crossing in the north. On July 10th, UN spokesperson Stefan Dodrick confirmed this holdup, stating that the UN is doing what it can, but that there is complete chaos on the Gazan side of the border, and that many of the trucks are attacked and looted, leading to very little aid reaching the population. Other news related to the humanitarian situation: after months of repeated technical problems, the floating pier in the Gaza Strip that was meant to facilitate creating a maritime corridor between Cyprus and the Gaza Strip is essentially being declared a failure. The United States announced on July 9th that the pier, which has disconnected from the shore many times due to weather conditions and security risks, is going to be reattached to the shore one last time in order to transfer all the remaining aid that is piled up in Cyprus, and after that the pier is going to be permanently dismantled and this operation is going to be abandoned. It's important to note, however, that the initial idea of the pier began to sprout up around March and April, and that is when it was constructed. At that time, there were no open land crossings that allowed aid to come into the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Since then, aid has been flowing to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip through different crossings, primarily the Erez crossing. Israel has also permitted aid to come through the port of Ashdod, albeit with difficulty. So it is also possible that there is less need for that pier right now. Either way, it is being abandoned, and the entire operation is, the report didn't state this, but I am stating, could be declared a failure. Moving on to the West Bank, on July 8th, Palestinian sources reported a settler attack that took place in Turmus Aya after finding an agricultural area that was torched and destroyed, and graffiti stating "revenge" in Hebrew sprayed throughout the area. Other news related to the West Bank: a major IDF operation took place in the Nur Shams refugee camp on July 8th and July 9th. This is an area near Tulkarem. These are some of the videos emerging from the area, with Palestinian sources reporting that the electricity to the entire region has been disconnected, with the operation lasting over 15 hours. The IDF also reported that during this operation destroyed at least 2 headquarters of local terror outfits in the region, and located dozens of underground explosives. In addition to this, other major IDF activity was reported in the areas of Tulkarem and Ramallah, and in other operations, the IDF located at least 3 weapons manufacturing labs that were destroyed. This is one of the pictures that the IDF published of some of the equipment that was confiscated in the area. In addition to this, on July 9th, Palestinian sources reported that Rassan Zaharan, a 13-year-old Palestinian, was shot and killed in the areas of Dir Abu Mashal village near Ramallah. The IDF confirmed the firing in the area, stating that Zaharan was part of a group of people who were throwing stones at cars that were passing by, and that the IDF opened fire in order to stop that stone throwing. Either way, according to reports, he was shot and killed. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel and southern parts of Lebanon, there were continuous escalations between both sides the last several days, with some particularly intensive missile and rocket barrages fired by Hezbollah causing casualties on the one hand, and more intensive attacks and IDF assassinations on the other. As part of these spirals, on July 8th, the IDF reported assassinating Mustafa Hassan Salman, targeting his motorcycle in the El Khalila area. While Salman is not a top-ranking operative in Hezbollah, he was a known figure in the rocket units of the organization. Hezbollah later confirmed his assassination. In addition, the IDF also reported carrying out attacks in the Maruna Ras area, as well as in Hanin, Ita Ash'ab, Shakra, and Ramesh, and there were other reports of attacks that occurred in Jabal Torah, Kabaria, Hula, and Ita Ash'ab. On that same day, Hezbollah fired rockets towards the Hula Valley and towards Yesod HaMa'ala. This is further south than Hezbollah commonly fires rockets, and there were barrages fired towards areas of Beit Hillel, Goshrim, Tel Chai, Kfar Baruch, and Kfar Giladi. There were also rockets fired towards areas of the Western Galilee, Shtula, Fetusa, and Netuah. Then, on July 9th, Hezbollah fired anti-tank missiles towards Avivim, causing massive fires to break out, and other rockets were also fired towards areas of Misgav'ah, Margaliot, and throughout the Galilee. 2 suicide drones were also intercepted above Tzfat. Later that day, on July 9th, the IDF carried out an airstrike targeting a car on the Beirut-Damascus road near Damascus, killing several people. The target of the assassination was reportedly Yasser Nimr Karnbash, who was the former personal bodyguard of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah, who was later confirmed killed. In retaliation, on July 9th, Hezbollah fired a barrage of over 40 rockets and Katyusha missiles towards the Golan Heights. Many fires broke out and 2 Israelis were killed near the Nafach junction when a rocket hit their car. The spiral between the sides continued on July 9th, with the IDF then carrying out major airstrikes in retaliation to that barrage of missiles, targeting different Hezbollah structures in the areas of Ravat Alathin, as well as carrying out attacks in the areas of Kavaria, as well as attacks in Kila village. Al-Akhbar also reported there were major attacks in the areas of Barashit, near the town of Bin Jbel, and there were other reports of attacks in the village of Tulin. Al-Miadin also reported major airstrikes in the areas of Nabishith. This is in the areas of Baalbek, deep in Lebanon. This led to continuing of the spiral on July 10th, with Hezbollah firing major barrages of dozens of Katyusha missiles towards the Golan Heights, stating that they are now in retaliation to the attack that occurred in Baalbek. Other rockets were also fired towards areas of Beit HaMeches in the Golan Heights, injuring 1 IDF soldier, and rockets were also fired towards areas of Kibbutz Dan, Snir, and Dafna, and several suicide drones also detonated above the areas of Katzrin. The IDF also continued its activity throughout the day, and the spiral continued, carrying out airstrikes in Tir Kherfa targeting Hezbollah operatives, as well as other attacks in the areas of Ita Sha'ab, Ataibe, and there was a later report of the IDF carrying out an attack against Hezbollah's air defense systems deep in Lebanon in the Janta region. So while that is as far as I go when it comes to the current spiral on July 10th, the fact that the latest report is that the IDF carried out an attack deep in Lebanon in Janta is likely going to lead Hezbollah to carry out now another barrage of missiles towards Israel, and we will likely see the spiraling continue in the coming days. In other news, on July 9th, Hezbollah published a 9-minute video showing drone footage of vast areas of northern Israel. The group claimed that their drone penetrated Israeli airspace, taking images of dozens of IDF bases and outposts, including Iron Dome batteries and other IDF infrastructure. Reports in Israel indicated that the security establishment believes that the images are authentic. Hezbollah also published a list of bases and outposts that it managed to take pictures of alongside the video. In addition to this, on July 10th, Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah gave an extended recording speech during the memorial of Muhammad Na'aman Nasser, who was assassinated last week. In his speech, Nasrallah emphasized that the ceasefire in northern Israel or southern Lebanon is contingent upon a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, adding that Hezbollah's aim is to distract the IDF and compel it to realize that the only way to stop the ongoing escalation in the north is to, quote, stop the aggression on Gaza. He concluded by stating, and again I quote, Hamas is negotiating on its behalf and on behalf of the entire resistance axis. Whatever Hamas is satisfied with is satisfying to us all. So this is to some extent Hezbollah giving its approval that if Hamas does accept the ceasefire, that is going to satisfy Hezbollah. Israel has, though, repeatedly stated that it is not going to accept that Hezbollah can just decide that a ceasefire is in effect. Israel is going to demand that Hezbollah pull further north. Remains to be seen how that develops. Some regional reports from the last several days. On July 8th, a drone was intercepted right before it penetrated Israeli airspace on the eastern side of the country. The Islamic Resistance and Iraq militia claimed responsibility, stating that they were targeting vital structures in Eilat. The Houthis later put out a statement, also saying that they participated in this effort. Responding to this, there were reports that emerged that on the night between July 8th and July 9th, the IDF carried out several airstrikes against pro-Iranian militias in Syria, specifically targeting the areas of Banyas and Latkia. The Saudi Al Arabiya news network later reported that Iranian ships freely deliver cargo to the port of Banyas, and that this is the area in which explosions were heard. In other regional news, in a rare development, the IDF reported firing tank shells and artillery fire on July 10th, targeting a Syrian military complex in the Golan Heights area, specifically in the areas of Quneitra and Rashidiyah. The IDF stated that the complex has violated the armistice agreements between the countries dating back to 1974. This is not a unique incident. It's not the first time in the war that the IDF has targeted the Syrian military specifically. However, it is quite rare that the IDF specifically only targets Syrian military targets instead of hitting them alongside pro-Iranian militias in the country. This occurred on July 10th. Moving on to some of the political developments of the last several days. On July 8th, Canada issued a condemnation to Israel's actions in the West Bank, specifically citing the expansion of settlements and the steps that Israel has taken to weaken the Palestinian Authority, stating that both of these things do not contribute to peace and stability in the region. Other political news, on July 9th, there was a report in Israel that there is growing concern in Israel's security establishment about the possibility of shortages in what was defined as basic ammunition for the IDF. The report stated that while the U.S. armament to Israel obviously takes the main headlines, at the same time several countries have informally stopped their weapons trading with Israel. These include Italy, Canada, and Belgium that announced that they're stopping weapons transfer to Israel, although there are some reports that the countries are continuing to do that just under the radar. It also includes Spain that held up shipments of weapons from India that were passing through ports in Spain, and the reports adds that there's at least one other world power that has stopped its weapons export to Israel. So the report emphasized that while Israel gets most of its weaponry from the United States, the basic armaments, tank shells, bullets, mechanical equipment, all come from other countries as well. There's growing concern that some of these countries are starting to withhold their weapons transports to Israel. Despite this, however, amidst the back-and-forth accusations, on July 10th, the Wall Street Journal reported that the United States is going to release a shipment of 1,700 250-kilogram bombs, that's roughly 500-pound bombs, to Israel in the coming days. The report adds that the hold of these bombs was due to the fact that this shipment was a mixed shipment that included another 1,800 bombs that weigh over 1 ton, and that these are still being withheld due to concerns that the United States has that they will be used in the areas of Rafah. However, now the shipment has been separated, and the smaller bombs, quote-unquote, the ones that weigh 500 pounds, are going to be delivered to Israel. If we summarize the main developments of the last several days, the summit meeting that is occurring in Qatar is one of the most crucial developments in the war right now. Depending on how the negotiations develop, we will see if we are heading towards a brewing deal, which may lead also to the IDF spiraling down its current operation in northern parts of the Gaza Strip, leading towards a deal, truce, possible ceasefire, or we will see that the negotiations do not advance and or that the IDF intensifies its operation both in northern parts of the Gaza Strip and in the southern parts in Rafah, and we will see where the winds are blowing in the coming days, but that is one of the key things to pay attention to. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Those are my highlights from the last several days. Thanks for watching.